Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast where we talk everything National Football League in season, off season. It does not matter because it is football. I am your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this conference title game weekend recap of the 2023 NFL season. As always, before we dive into the show, I'd like to ask if you've not done so already to please like, subscribe, and share the video if you've not done so already and you enjoy this kind of content. And you know anybody that does enjoy this kind of content, helps boost the exposure, helps us get out to more eyeballs in the algorithm. So if you have not done so and you'd like to, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to that will be in the description down below to help support the channel financially. But let's get on with the show. Conference title game weekend is in the books. The Super Bowl matchup has been officially set. And I think I speak for everybody where it was by far the most disappointing matchup that we could have possibly asked for. I went into this weekend saying, and many people were going into this weekend saying, that the vast majority of football fans out there were basically Ravens and Lions fans this weekend. And, well, the football gods like to kick us in the dick every now and then, don't they? But yeah, let's just go straight into it. Let's just talk about the games. First of all, the AFC Championship game. Chiefs-Ravens, a game where the seemingly unbeatable Baltimore Ravens, a team that was just steamrolling through everybody, a team that was every opponent that stood in their way, they were able to just not just beat, but beat with ease, from the 49ers to the Dolphins. All these great elite teams that stood in their way, the Ravens were easily able to dispose of them. And a lot of that had to do with Lamar, who set up to win probably most likely his second league MVP award. And that defense, which has been lights out all year. Also aided by the number one rushing attack in all of football. You would not know any of those things. You would not have thought any of those things were even remotely true if you watched this game. You might have believed the defense part because the defense was able to hold the Chiefs offense in check throughout the entire second half. They didn't allow a point in the second half. But offensively, I don't know what the hell happened with this team. I don't understand what the game plan going into it was. Yeah, Jim Harbaugh, Todd Monken, let's just take an offense with an MVP quarterback and an offense with the number one rushing attack in all of football this year. Let's just, with that rushing attack, only run the ball 8 times. Number one rushing attack, offensively, the entire regular season, only ran 8 designed run plays the whole game. They looked at their strength offensively and said, you know what? Let's just, you know that stuff, that formula that worked for us as a team all season? Yeah, let's just not do that. That formula that allowed us to steamroll some of the elite teams in the NFL, let's just not run that game plan. Let's just not do our bread and butter. Not even once. I don't understand what the thought process going into the game was, especially considering, like, okay, great running game going against a Chiefs defense that's been great all year, but their one weakness was their run defense. They were a below average run defense this year. And you chose not to attack it? You instead tried to attack them through the air, where they've been a consistent top 5 unit against the pass all season? I don't understand what the thought process throughout the whole week for that was. I don't understand how they thought that was going to go. The story of this game, at the end of the day, was the Ravens just kept getting in their own way. From the whole week of practice leading up to this week, by installing a game plan where they just deliberately chose not to utilize their strengths, to the dumbass mental mistakes made throughout this entire game. And I'm just going to say this right now, Ravens fans, cut it with the ref bullshit. Stop saying the refs screwed you. Stop saying the refs had no calls. In fact, the no calls in this game were actually in benefit of the Ravens. The no calls and bad calls in this game were actually against the Kansas City Chiefs. So you were actually the beneficiary of some suspect refereeing. You lost this game because this team just kept fucking itself over. From Zay Flowers with the stupid ass taunting penalty that put a situation where they would have been a first and goal at the 10-yard line, instead made it to a 1st and 10 from their own 25. In a drive that later resulted in Zay Flowers fumbling at the 1-yard line. To the unnecessary roughness on Kyle Van Noy, the fucking roughing the passer penalty on Travis Jones, where he basically sucker punched Patrick Mahomes. Like, I know we always bitch about the roughing the passer penalties, but you can't get more blatant than that. And it was just these dumbass mental mistakes. Lamar Jackson chucking a ball late in the game, trying to play hero ball in a situation where he doesn't necessarily need to play hero ball when they were finally getting momentum going, and then just chucking one down the seam to Isaiah Likely right into triple coverage. I watched, there was not a single moment where Isaiah Likely even hinted at being open. And Lamar just straight up forced it. They got in their own way. They have nobody else to blame for this loss but themselves. And now the narrative that we thought Lamar was on pace to completely squashing based on how he performed last week against Houston, now all of a sudden is back, which is Lamar Jackson, great in the regular season, but can you really rely on him in the postseason? It was kind of the same thing with Dak Prescott, where the narratives that we thought were finally going to be squashed, or thought were already squashed, have now all of a sudden been reinforced. It's the same thing with Dak back in the wild card round, where it's once you get into the postseason, you see the guy that's going to take you further and win you and get you over that hump to winning a championship. Lamar looked like he was on pace to doing that. And in one game, just completely squandered it. 10 points. 10 points to show for it. From an offense that was just dominating every enemy that stood in their path. And when it mattered the most, they barely got to double digits. It's embarrassing. It really, really is embarrassing. And they're now going to have to think about that for the rest of the offseason. And they might pull a New Orleans Saints and Michael Thomas and all that shit and start pointing fingers, trying to say, no, we got screwed because this. No, we all see through the bullshit. You lost this game. You're the reason why you couldn't win in a game where everybody had you pegged to win it. But that's all for the Ravens. As far as the Chiefs go, it's like the Patriots dynasty reborn. Just when you think this team is finally dead in the water, they rise from the ashes and fucking drive the stake through your heart. This team is the definition of they're not dead until they're dead. even in a season where they were not nearly as talented, they were not nearly as good, they had problems all year from the wide receiver position, and they basically limped into the postseason with very little to, if any, momentum. And they rallied off of a win against the Miami Dolphins in the wild card round in frigid temperatures, but that was expected. But then the game against Buffalo last week, where they were able to hold them off to win, to advance to this game against Baltimore. And Mahomes and the offense didn't do much, but they did enough early in the game to put up 17 points, which apparently was too much for them to add, too much for the Ravens to try and match. Who would have thunk it? But all of a sudden, here we are in a year where we thought the Chiefs can't possibly do it again because they're not nearly as good enough, not even close to being as good as some of the top teams in the AFC that they're going to have to run into. And now all of a sudden they're going to Vegas, representing the AFC for the second consecutive year and looking to do something that has not been done since the 03-04 New England Patriots, which is repeat as Super Bowl champions. They are one game away from doing something that has not been accomplished in, what is that, nearly 20 years? In about 18 years? They are one game away from accomplishing that. How? I don't have the faintest clue. I don't understand how this is possible, how this was able to happen. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, they rigged it for the Swifties. They rigged it for Taylor Swift. Shut up with that shit. Just honestly shut up with it. The reason I think the Kansas City Chiefs still made it to this point, even when everybody, myself included, as I hit my mic a little bit, the reason they made it back to this point is ultimately because they're battle tested. And that's the theme of the two teams that are in the Super Bowl, and I'll touch on that later. They're battle tested. Patrick Mahomes has been there and done that before. Andy Reid has been there and done that before. Travis Kelce has been there and done that before. Spags has been there and done that before. This whole team is very battle tested. This is the 6th consecutive season where they've made it to at least the AFC Championship game. This is the 4th time, right? 4th time, yeah, in 6 years where they've made it to the Super Bowl. This team, at the end of the day, when they get into the big moments, they know how to win them. Because they've been there so many times now. That's why they're able to beat teams like Buffalo, even though Buffalo's more significantly talented. That's why they're able to beat teams like Baltimore, despite the fact that they're so much more talented than them. Even though those teams they played against beat them on paper and have more talent than them and probably should beat them relatively easily, the pressure, the bigger the stage, is a real thing. And the Chiefs are just not fazed by the pressure. Hell, this, for the most part, this is damn near the same team exactly that won the Super Bowl just last year. They're not afraid of this. They're not afraid of the spotlight. They're not afraid of the pressure that's going to be put on them. In the case of Patrick Mahomes and Kelce and Reid, not only have they been here multiple times before, they've lost at this point multiple times before. So they know what it's like to win. They also know what it's like to lose. I'm not sitting here saying they are playing with house money, but they know how to win in these situations. And here we are again, and Patrick Mahomes is now going to have a chance to officially assert himself in the race to try and catch Tom Brady for the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. He is sitting there on the beaten narrow path, has a chance to put himself firmly square in a car on the yellow brick road right to Emerald City, where the GOAT, Tom Brady, currently resides. This is something that we have never thought we would ever see again because of Tom Brady for 20 consecutive years winning and winning and winning and making playoffs and making conference title games and making Super Bowls and winning Super Bowls. We all said to ourselves we were never going to see something like Tom Brady ever again. And here's Patrick Mahomes in his 7th year in the league, his 6th as a starter, and he already has 2 league MVPs to his name, 2 Super Bowl MVPs to his name, 2 Super Bowl championships. This is 4th total appearance in the game already. And every year as a starter, he's made it to at least the AFC Championship game. It is Brady-esque. And he's been able to accomplish all of this yet. He's been able to accomplish all of this. There we go. And he's not even 29 years old. That's the scary part. He has made 4 Super Bowls already, won 2 of them, has a chance to win a 3rd one, with 2 MVPs already in the trophy case, 2 Super Bowl MVPs already in the trophy case. He's accomplished all of this. He's now tied or 1 win away from being tied for 2nd all-time in career postseason wins, and he's not even 29. It's unbelievable. It really is Tom Brady 2.0. And now I sit here as a Patriots fan. I now understand why every other football fan hated us for so many years. Because they look and it's like, oh my God, the Chiefs are in there again. But at some point, it's like, you look at the other teams and they're pissed about it too. And it's like, well, try and stop them. Try and put your neck on their... Try and put your foot on their throat. And make sure they don't breathe. They can't do that. Because the Kansas City Chiefs always somehow have a counter to it. They're always one step ahead. They always seem to know what you're doing when they get into these situations. It's incredible to see. And as a Patriots fan who watched my team dominate for so many years, I can't even be mad at it. But yeah, another situation that we didn't think was going to be possible. We are now replaying the same story once again. Now let's go on to talk about what was probably the most depressing one, honestly. The most depressing of the 2 games, which was the NFC Championship game between the 49ers and the Detroit Lions. A game where I, along with many people who aren't 49er fans, are probably really excited watching. Because this is a game that the Detroit Lions were up, 24-7 going into halftime of this game. The Lions were running away with this game. They were just moving up and down the field at will. The 49er offense couldn't find an answer to move the ball themselves against the Detroit Lion defense. And you went into halftime up 24-7, and we're like, oh my God, it's going to happen. I can't believe it's actually going to happen. And the Lions were the last line of defense, because I went into this postseason, and many people went into this postseason saying, all right, the one matchup nobody really wants to see in the Super Bowl is Chiefs 49ers. Chiefs had already punched their ticket by this point. The Lions were our last hope. And it was so easy to root for them. And it looked like it was going to happen because everything just looked so easy for the Detroit Lions in this game. And then the second half started, where the 49ers kicked a field goal to make it a 14-point game. Lions, again, moving the ball down the field with ease, running the ball. The 49er defense couldn't stop the run for most of this game. Then they get into their own deep into 49er territory. 4th and 2 comes up. Dan Campbell, we all knew Dan Campbell was probably going to go for it. I would have been like, hey, just take the points, go back up by 17, still make it a 3-score game. But I didn't hate the idea of going for it, to just drive the dagger further into their hearts. And they don't convert it. Josh Reynolds drops a ball that was behind him, but relatively catchable. And then the 49ers hit a play where Brock Purdy he just heaved it. He just heaved it deep down the field, deep inside the red zone. And Kindle Vildor was in perfect position to make the interception. The ball hits him right in the face mask. Ball bounces up, and Brandon Ayuk with a circus catch to put the 49ers within the 5-yard line. And then a couple plays later, Brandon Ayuk is able to punch it in and score the touchdown and make it a 1-score game. That one play in a game where the 49ers couldn't really do much offensively at all up to that point. That one fluky-ass play is what just changed the momentum on a dime. And that's when I, and everybody else watching the game, Lions fans especially, I can't imagine what they must have felt. That was the moment where it's like, oh no. The momentum's shifting. This is not good. And then the Lions get the ball back on offense, and the first play on offense after that, Jahmyr Gibbs fumbles the handoff, 49ers fall on it. They go down, all of a sudden, game is tied. And then eventually 49ers take a lead up by 3. And then that's when we get to the fourth quarter, and this is where the conversation has started ever since this game has ended, which was Dan Campbell's decision when the Lions were driving down the field. They got into around the 30-yard line of San Francisco. They stall out on a 4th and 3. And Dan Campbell decides to go for it. Now, again, that's been his philosophy all year. And in that moment, I thought, bro, you don't have the momentum. You're down. You're in field goal range. Just kick the field goal. And the game is tied. It's a 4th and 3. 4th and 1, 4th and 2, I maybe understand it. But this was a 4th and 3, especially considering at the end of the half, they got deep inside the 5. They stall out on a 4th and goal at the 3-yard line. And Dan Campbell kicked it then. He took the points to go into half. So that's what made this decision to go for it on a 4th and 3 down 3 points even more confusing. Because he was willing to do it earlier. He was willing to just take the field goal earlier in the game. Why not now? And look, I'm of the firm belief that it's one of those things where it's like, hey, make the field goal or not make the field goal. If you go for it, if you convert it, you're hailed as a genius. If you don't, you're viewed as an idiot. And Dan Campbell has lived by that sword all year. Live by the sword, die by the sword. And they didn't convert. And the 49ers just took that opportunity, drove down the field, scored a touchdown. They put themselves up 10, and that basically felt like the game. And a game where the Detroit Lions had it. They were up 17 at one point. They had it. They had it in their grasp. And they let it slip through their fingers. Magical season comes to an end in a brutal, brutal way. And Dan Campbell's been scrutinized a lot as a result of this. And honestly, I'm not going to do that because like I said earlier, if they would have gone for it and they would have converted it, he would have been viewed as a genius. But yeah, it is something that you have to question of in that situation. Just take the 3 points, considering earlier you did just very that. So he's it's viewed as Dan Campbell's aggressiveness eventually just costs them the season. His aggressiveness cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. And that's going to sting. And Dan Campbell said after the game, like, hey, he told his team straight up, this might have been our only shot. But they have to come back with just as much hunger and passion as they did this past year. Because now we know they're one of the top dogs. We know everybody's going to be gunning for them now. So that's what he meant when he said, like, hey, it's going to be much harder to get back to this point this year or next year than it was this year. And he's right, though. As a former player himself, he knows how hard it is to just make it to the conference title game, let alone the Super Bowl. So you're right. You wish you could take advantage of those opportunities because, especially considering the Lions, how they were bad for so many years, and they've only had one playoff win in the previous 65 before this year. It is one of those things that creep into your mind of, was this our only opportunity? Was this our only chance to make it to a spot where we never made it before, and we blew it? That stuff that stuff climbs into your brain, and that's a scary thing. As a team, as a fan, of, was this the best shot that we would have ever had? Because, every time we get to this time of year, my brain always goes to what Kurt Warner said many years ago, where when they made the Super Bowl in 2001, the then St. Louis Rams made the Super Bowl in 2001 in the game they were playing against the Patriots. There was a rookie on the team, forgot what his name was, but that rookie was, his first year in the league, and he's on a team that makes it to the Super Bowl. And it was a great team. That Rams team, the greatest show on turf, they were a great team. And Warner said, like, that rookie, he kept telling him, like, hey, cherish this moment. And, that guy just kind of blew it off because it's like, hey, we just made the Super Bowl and it's only my rookie year. We're a great team. We're going to make the Super Bowl every year now. And they lost that game to New England. And that guy was like, hey, it's okay. We're a great team. We're going to be back here next year and the year after that. That guy ended up playing 10 years, having a 10-year career in the NFL, never made it back. But, like, even on an example of, like, a broader sense, Dan Marino made the Super Bowl in his second year in 1984 with, up to that point, the greatest season a quarterback had ever had, up to that point in history. And he made it to the Super Bowl with the Miami Dolphins, and they lost to the San Francisco 49ers. But Marino was like, or at least everybody viewed it as like, hey, Dan Marino's a great quarterback. This is a good team. They're going to be back here at some point. Dan Marino played, 16 more years after that? 15 more years after that Super Bowl. Never made it back. He made a Super Bowl in his second season and never made it back in his, what is that? That was his 17-year career. 17-year career, and Dan Marino only made it one time. It's hard to get to that point. It's hard to even make the conference title game. And as somebody who's experienced a lot of conference title game weekends, playing in the conference title game is more stressful than playing in the Super Bowl. Because in the Super Bowl, it's like, hey, we at least made it to that spot. In the conference championship game, if you lose it, You now have to watch Super Bowl 2 weeks away, and you're watching that game, and you're like, if we would have made it, we probably could have beaten them. And that's the thing that eats at you. As a team, as a fan, that eats at you. So I don't blame Lions fans for thinking this might have been our best shot. This might have been our only shot. It's a tough thing. It's a really, really tough thing to swallow as a fan. But they're still going to be a good team going forward. They're still going to be a great team going forward because Dan Campbell has done a phenomenal job with building this team, building this culture. I think they're going to be fine. I still think they're going to be in the mix. But it is going to be tough. It definitely is going to be tough, and this is a tough pill to swallow. But as far as the 49ers go, we just need to talk about Brock Purdy. Because when we talk about this 49er team, we talk about how talented they are. We talk about how great their defense is. We talk about all the great skilled players. Christian McCaffrey is going to be playing in his first Super Bowl. George Kittle is going to be back in the Super Bowl. Deebo Samuel is going to be back in the Super Bowl for the first time since 2019 for those guys, with a chance to win their first ring. But when you talk about this team, we have to talk about Brock Purdy. Because what has been the one thing that we have criticized Brock Purdy for all year, aside from being a system quarterback? And that one thing was, how good is he actually when the pressure's on him? Because throughout his entire time as a starter, even dating back to last year, and throughout the regular season this year, every time the 49ers have won, they've won in blowout fashion. So Brock Purdy hasn't had a situation where he's needed to put the team on his back and go and win the game late in the fourth quarter in the final 2 minutes. So far, that's all he's had to do in these playoffs. He had to do it last week against Green Bay, where down by a touchdown, he needed to go score a touchdown to take the lead and win the game. He did that in a game where he struggled for most of it, and he delivered in a drive that mattered the most. And now you look at this game, in a game where they went into halftime down 17 points, and he was able to stay calm, not be phased, and will this team back to not just to tie the game, but eventually to win it. And he did his part. He wasn't just carried by Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel or George Kittle. He made some great plays in this game with both his arm and with his legs as well. That's the key thing, is like Brock Purdy made some incredible plays in this game, extending the play, moving the chains with his legs. He's not a mobile guy, or at least he's not known for his mobility. And he made some great plays in key situations where he had to pick up key first downs with his legs. And this was the game where I was like, okay, yeah. This is not a system quarterback. This is not a guy who I was critical of as a guy that was benefit from the system and the guys around him, and he can only play at a truly elite MVP caliber level when he has all those guys around him. These playoffs have shown me that he's not like that. He's different. He's the reason why he's been able to get the most out of this crew when guys like Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't. Ultimately, he was the guy that Kyle Shanahan and this 49er team needed at quarterback, and he's been everything they've hoped for. All the questions, in my opinion, that we've asked of him, of how good is he actually, in my opinion so far, he's answered. And he has passed the test with flying colors. So, I ultimately think the 49ers have their guy, especially if they win. Like, if they win, they have their guy for the future, in my opinion. And not in like a Jared Goff sense with the Rams, where they might have paid him too much too early. And Jared Goff really was a guy who was a beneficiary of Sean McVay's system. Brock Purdy's he just feels different. He just feels different. And he might be a game manager. He might be viewed as a game manager because he's not one of these traitsy, game-breaking type of guys like a Mahomes, like an Allen, like a Lamar, like a Joe Burrow. But he just knows how to play football. That's all it is. And, somebody posed this question. I can't remember who said it on Twitter. Where they were like, we're always talking about Patrick Mahomes and his quest to catching Tom Brady for the greatest of all time because of his accolades up to this point. But somebody posed the question of, if Brock Purdy wins 2 Sundays from now, does he put himself in the trajectory to being the next Tom Brady? And I thought about it, and it's like 2 quarterbacks who would have won the Super Bowl in their second year in the league, and both guys who were perceived as game manager types, who were not originally supposed to be franchise quarterbacks, being the fact that they were both late round picks and guys who weren't even supposed to make the roster originally, and guys who were viewed as, if the guys ahead of them didn't get hurt, they would have never seen the field. And also were the beneficiary of being on great teams, but still had to do their part to make sure that they were able to win and finish the job, where other guys in their position probably wouldn't be able to do so. You can see the similarities. Now, I'm not sitting here saying Brock Purdy's going to beat Tom Brady. I'm still of the belief that nobody can ever beat Tom Brady. Even Patrick Mahomes right now, because yes, he has the accolades to put him on that pace, but he still has to perform at that level for another 15 years. Because Tom Brady played for 23 years. Patrick Mahomes is only in year 7. He still has a long way to go to even still be in that conversation. That's why Tom Brady's the GOAT, because he not only has all those accolades, but he did it for so long. But you can definitely see the similarities there with the start of Brock Purdy's career and the start of Tom Brady's career. And it's an interesting thing to think of. So if there's anything to be interested about in the Super Bowl, it's one of these guys has a chance to put themselves on the path to being the next Tom Brady in different ways. Mahomes because he's a little more established, and Purdy because he's the underdog that nobody thought would originally do anything. So I know it's the Super Bowl matchup that nobody thought would be super interesting going into it. But that's something that could be very, very fascinating, potentially, coming out of this game for whoever the victor ends up being. But that's that for the Super Bowl, man. That was kind of like a little mini Super Bowl preview there, which is 2 teams that are pretty much supervillains. And I know for football fans who don't have a rooting interest in the game, it's not overly fun to root for 2 bad guys in this sense. But this is the first time we've gotten this Super Bowl matchup in, was it about 5 years now? Last time these 2 teams actually played each other in the Super Bowl was 5 years ago. So there's that. And also, the players in this game are older. They're more experienced. They have more playoff experience. They're both teams that shown to be vulnerable, but because they're battle tested, were able to pull off wins that no other team would have been able to pull off, most likely. And were able to get the better of teams that aren't as battle-tested as them. And that's how they both got to this point. Even though they probably shouldn't have, if we're all being real. And this is a legacy game. It's a legacy for the Chiefs, because this could determine Patrick Mahomes' career trajectory on catching Tom Brady. This could determine what Andy Reid is like after this game of, does he think about retirement with a win or a loss? I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. For the 49ers, does this finally get the monkey off of Kyle Shanahan's back as a guy who was, he couldn't ever make it over the hump and win the big game? After all, he was the offensive coordinator on that 2016 Atlanta Falcons team, that 28-3 team. He was a part of that. Does a win get that monkey off his back? A win finally give guys like McCaffrey and Debo and Kittle, finally gives them their championship ring that was ripped away from them those years ago, many years ago. In the first matchup between these two teams in the Super Bowl. And what does a win do for Brock Purdy? Does it finally silence his haters? Does it finally put him in a situation where he can be viewed as one of the elites, depending on how he performs in this game? And based on what he's shown in the postseason up to this point, it's not out of the realm of possibility of, with a win and an impressive performance by Purdy, he does officially assert himself into one of the elites of the league. Because at the end of the day, the only stat that matters is winning. The only intangible that matters is winning. So I know it's not the one that fans most wanted. It's not the one I necessarily wanted. But it's the one we got. And it's not to say that there aren't some interesting things to talk about heading into this game and potentially coming out of this game. And hey, at the end of the day, it's probably going to do big numbers because they're two big name teams. And the Chiefs are going to have the Swifties. So you already know that there's going to be a lot of viewers just based on that. So I know some people are not going to like hearing that, but hey, it is what it is. But ladies and gentlemen, that is going to put a wrap on the video today. Stick around for next week because I'm going to have a little something special planned. A little bit of a preview of what the off-season content-wise on this channel is going to be. But as always, if you've not done so already, please like, subscribe, and share the video if you've not done so already. And also go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/DoubleDieselSports. The link to that will be in the description down below. But with that being said, I'm Double Diesel. Peace.